At this time, sorry about that, Dan. At this time, I'd like to invite all of the children of the church to come forward for our blessing time together this morning. And I would also like to invite the moderator of St. John's Church, Ben Teat, to come forward, as he is also a child of God, but he will be delivering us our blessing today.
Hello, everybody. My name is Ben, and one of my roles here at St. John's is to make sure that the screens and our live broadcasts are all working. How many of you have attended a worship service? Show up. Oh, good. You're all experts. What do we need to worship God? Do we need a church building? What do we need? People? Oh, good one, yeah. Do we need music? Sometimes. Do we need a pastor? Do we need all these things, or can we worship God on our own? Yeah, I think we can. But why do we have all these things in our service? Anyone have an idea? Well, I like to think that it makes the worship experience better. And one thing that we have that helps make our worship experience better are our screens. So the screens help us in a couple ways, at least that I think. One is that everyone knows what to do because it's on the screen. It tells us what to say, right? And we don't need to use paper. A lot of other churches hand out paper bulletins. They have to be printed, and we use trees for that. It's also, with the screens, a whole lot easier to participate online. How many people have watched the service online? I know we all did during COVID, and we've kept it going. And the screens help us to know what we're supposed to do if we're worshiping online. But how does all this work? So I have some visual aids. If I can find a place to sit with you all, otherwise I need to grow another arm. Okay. So how does everything work? Well, we go too fast for me. There we go. So, how do we get stuff on the screens? Well, it all starts with the worship team that plans for our different liturgical seasons. And then our pastor, Pastor Nathan, each week writes the script for the service, the order of worship. And then Mr. Joel, our music director, adds all of the music and decides what music we're going to sing. And then Miss Sally, has anyone met Miss Sally? She works here during the week downstairs. Yeah, a couple of you have. She takes all that and makes the draft of the slides. So she has the music in there, she writes down the lyrics. A lot of the stuff that we see on Sunday is all from Miss Sally writing it from the order of worship that Pastor Nathan created. When Miss Sally is done, then it gets sent to me, and I add the background pictures. Sometimes that takes a lot of effort. And I do another thing that makes all of the slides work like a robot. So a lot of other churches have an AV booth, and this is a little over the top, but with a couple people, a whole lot of screens, a bunch of computers, a bunch of slidey things, and they're using that to choose what we can hear. So, earlier in the service, this microphone wouldn't have done anything. It would have sounded like this. They wouldn't have been able to hear it. But because we're in the children's blessing section and people use the microphone, it just automatically turns on because each one of these slides is kind of like a robot and it knows what to do. So instead of having, 3 or 4 people in this big room somewhere, or maybe a booth in the back where people aren't participating in the service, we have a couple people that tell the robot when to do its work. So in our church, we have a camera. Do you see it back there? Hold on. How about now? Is it a little better? Oh, let's get a little closer. There it is. It's way in the back. And that camera, yeah, you see it, That lets everyone who's worshiping remotely see us. So they can see that they're worshiping with other people. And that camera can look at different directions. So it can look at the pulpit, it can look at the lectern, it can look at the table, it can pick up the whole room if we want to. And on each slide it says, what should we be looking at? Should we see something? What should we look at? So it tells the camera where to look at. Back in the back room, and I don't know if anyone's been in there, but there's this giant black box. It's kind of intimidating, but what this does is it takes all of our audio. So this is audio. You can see that Pastor Nathan's wearing a little microphone on him all the time, and if Miss Barb isn't close enough to the lectern, we can't hear her because she has to be up to that microphone. There are even microphones on the side of the chancel, one way up, somewhere up there that gets the whole congregation. And we have a whole bunch of other places where we can plug in instruments if we have special music. That's a lot to control, and that's why one of those people in that back room would just be controlling the audio, maybe 2 people. But we just automate it so we don't have to worry about it. We also have a whole bunch of slides. So it's kind of hard to tell from back here, but each one of our services has over 100 slides that we go through. And those slides tell us what to say. It might even change camera angles that we don't even notice the change here, but remotely you might notice a change. It does the announcements at the beginning of the service and after the service. And so it's quite a bit to control there. And if you're visiting or watching remotely, you might notice that the layout changes a bunch of times. Well, that's a decision we have to make too. So sometimes we want to see what's on the screen because we've got to read it. Sometimes we're focused on what Pastor Nathan is saying, so we want to see him full screen. And sometimes we, have someone speaking along with the slides. Sometimes we don't. So we need to decide what is our layout for the people watching remotely. Also, and I don't know if you've been exposed to this much, but we also have comments. And so while people are watching the service remotely, we put in comments that tell them, how they can donate to the church, how they can register as a visitor so we can talk to them later. And sometimes people message us back. And sometimes they say, I can't hear anything. And we've got to go figure that out right away. Or we can't see anything. And so it's important to stay connected to the people that are watching, even if they're not here. It's easy for someone in here to say, hey, we can't hear you, your mic's not on. But if they're at home, we don't know unless they send us a message. So we got all this stuff going on, and we don't have that booth of people. What we have is this thing. It's kind of hard to tell because the iPad doesn't look like much, but that's an iPad. And you might notice that Mr. Dan or Mr. Casey or I am holding an iPad through the service. Well, that's not because we're watching something else because we don't want to be here. It's because we're controlling what slide we're going to see. That's the only input that we normally need because the rest of it, we tell it what to do, and our little robot friend takes care of it. This is going to be a little bit difficult to see, too. Yeah, that's pretty much impossible. But it's trying to zoom in on the notes for each slide. So each slide has notes, and normally those notes are for the person that's operating the slide. Like, as an example, at the end of the gospel reading, it will say the last few words so we know when to move ahead, or if there's going to be some liturgy that doesn't require the congregation to respond, then it has a note for when the projectionist should go to the next slide. But there are also little tiny codes at the bottom, and you can't see them from here. I don't know if you can see them there. But it has a little pound symbol or a hashtag symbol, depending on how old you are. And it has a bunch of information after it. And that information tells it what layout to use for the people watching at home, what camera we should be looking, or what the camera should be looking at and how zoomed in it should be, what microphone should be on, which microphone should be off. It decides when to start the service. It decides when to send a message out on the chat. And so unless there's something strange that happens, what the projectionist does is really just push that little button in the lower right that says next. And as long as that order of worship and everything goes as planned, then it's just next through the whole service. But, everything doesn't always go as planned. And so if we have a special case, we can also override and control everything manually. But if we had to do that through the whole service, we'd need those 3 people in that big booth and all that stuff. So most of the time, we get to just look at what we've got, and everything kind of works out. And one person can control everything. I think the other benefit of one person being able to control everything is that they still get to participate in the service. So they're still here, and they still get to read and sing and have communion. They're not separated out. I do want to do a quick thank you. I don't know if we can all clap for Mr. Dan and Mr. Casey, who help out every week to make sure that we can see what's on the slides. And I think we have a fun game to play downstairs where we get to control the slides and play a game. So that'll be fun. But we're going to go downstairs to do that, and I think maybe we can exit out this way, and I can show you the stuff in the back room real quick. But before we do that, we'll have a quick blessing. So Pastor Nathan always comes over here, and he puts up his hand. So we're going to do the same way. So can you all put up your hand and say, Dear God.
Dear God.
Thank you for giving us many ways to worship you.
Thank you for giving us many ways to worship you.
And for robots.
And for robots.
Amen.
Amen. Wonderful. And can we show our appreciation for Ben, too, for the colossal amount of work that goes in each week behind the scenes to help make this all possible.